back to Wellbeing Wednesdays, brought to you by the Tulane University Counseling Center. I'm one of your co-hosts, Shawna Foose. I'm a staff therapist at our center, and I'm joined as always by my lovely co-host.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jinaki, Flint, staff psychologist here at the Counseling Center. And today we are joined by another one of our colleagues, Ginette Argüello. Ginette, you want to introduce yourself?
Hello, thank you for having me. And I'm Ginette Argüello, a staff therapist here at the Uptown Center. And we have another lovely guest here with us, Gabriel Rodriguez.
Thank you all for the lovely introduction, and thank you for inviting me. I'm always glad to work with the Counseling Center and very happy to be back in Wellness Wednesdays.
Gabe,
I always love to have you.
Yeah, tell us what your role is at the university.
Thank you. So I am the program coordinator at the Center for Academic Equity.
Excellent.
Yes, Gabe, I just want to step in here and just say that you also run the Equity Thursdays when, yes, and that is an important program. So I just want to just shout that out. Can you just start with a little bit of that before we get into your presentation, just so people can know what is Equity Thursdays?
Thank you, Jinaki. I'd love to. So Equity Thursdays is a weekly program that we put on at the Center for Academic Equity. So it's a conversation series that happens every Thursday. It's in the name, from 12:30 to 1:30 p.m. And we have a different topic, right, every week. We always provide lunch, and it's open to, right, every community on Tulane's campus. And thank you for this, because we've now relocated. So we have new offices in the first floor of Richardson Building. So Equity Thursdays has moved to the outdoor space just in front of Richardson and right next to Richardson Memorial Hall.
Congratulations, by the way, on your new space.
Oh, thank you. We're very excited.
That's wonderful. Yeah, so you have a presentation for us on the UnDocuAlly program here, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Why don't we go ahead and jump right into that?
Sounds great. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Right. Okay. And can everyone see my screen?
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, perfect. Yes, so thank you. So I'll be presenting a condensed version of the UnDocuAlly training. So this was originally presented by the Undocumented Student Support Committee. So this particular version was created by Carla Rosas and Brianna Mohan. So two amazing people. So I've updated and added to it. So this was built on the work of a lot of other incredible folks in higher education. This was originally actually done by Eric Ruiz at the University of St. Francis. So just want to acknowledge all the awesome work that other folks have done. So this is available as a sort of like full training. So if there are any other departments or student orgs that would be interested in having this presented to them, yeah, I'm absolutely happy to do that. But we'll be cutting this down a little bit to present just the me talking at people parts. But I'll try and keep it interesting. So moving on. So looking at this agenda, so we've already gone through our introductions, but if this were like a full training, there would be a lot of time for crosstalk and folks to engage with each other. So we'd start there. Then we're going to talk a little bit about the committee history and focus. We're going to go over some definitions, some terminology. We'll talk about undocumented and documented students just in higher education in general. We'll go over a little bit of Tulane's positions and actions, and then we'll talk about what it means to be an UnDocuAlly. So that's what you can expect in our time today. So first of all, just looking at the committee. So this training was created by the Undocumented Student Support Committee. So this was actually begun in November 2016 after, so now not the last presidential election, but the presidential election before that. And it was started by Vanessa Castañeda, who is a PhD candidate in Latin American studies. So she was really critical and was kind of one of the main driving forces in creating the committee. And they got a lot of stuff done in maybe like a year and a half. It was actually really impressive. So they created, so this campus-wide training, right, intended for use by faculty, staff, and students about how to support undocumented students. They created a full website with tons of resources. So I believe that's tulane.edu/undocumented. So that's still up. We try and update it regularly, keep everything relevant, up to date. They also managed to get, what is now in part was folded into my position. So a full-time staff member, who has it in their job description to support undocumented students. And maybe the biggest win was convincing Tulane to hire an immigration attorney. And that is Marco, who's over at Tulap. He's still here. He still does amazing work. And he is open or taking appointments to pretty much any Tulane affiliate. And he's happy to do consultations, not just for Tulane faculty, staff, and students, but also for their family members as well. So it's an incredible resource and also totally free. So I just want to make sure that folks know about that. Yeah, the committee got a lot done in just around a year.
It was a remarkable. I remember when all of that happened, and I remember Vanessa, and it was just really remarkable to see the way action was able to happen so quickly. It was really, really neat.
Yeah, I was a student here at the time, so I was like super impressed and really happy to see this big coalition of graduate students and faculty and staff come together to do this work. It's definitely expiring and really very sorely needed in the wake of the election. So moving on, why are we talking about this? Why are we here? Why was I invited? To Wellbeing Wednesdays. So there's a few different reasons. So number one is just to bring awareness to the issue, to educate folks a little bit on what it means to be undocumented or to have DACA status, or any other sort of related status. We're here to think about how to navigate our relationships with communities that are impacted by changes in immigration law. We're here to think about how we can use our privilege to assist these communities, We are all sort of lucky enough to be either working or a student at, a very prestigious private university. So, what can we do? How can we leverage that privilege? And then we're also here to, drive home the point that undocumented folks aren't, separate from us, some unknowable population that's mysterious, They're people we know, we work with, they're our friends, they're our family. And we want to make sure that people understand that they're part of our communities. So next up, we'll just go through some quick language and terminology that we'll be seeing a lot in this presentation, and that's just good to know in general when we're holding these conversations. So starting off, what is undocumented? So all that means is that someone is lacking appropriate documentation to establish permanent residency, So shorthand for that is a green card, If you have a green card, you are a permanent resident of the United States. So DACAmented is just an undocumented person, in this context, student, that has DACA status. And we'll talk a little bit more about what DACA actually is in a second. So unauthorized is a related term. So that's lacking authorization to be present and or living in the United States. So it's a little different from undocumented, authorization just means sort of lacking, temporary residency or something else like that. And then finally at the bottom, we have the words illegals or aliens. So very sadly, these are still in use. You'll still hear people, say these things to refer to undocumented individuals. So I just want to reiterate, make sure everyone knows that these are really negative. These terms demonize and dehumanize people, and we really should, right, avoid using them at all costs. And they're also just, right, inaccurate and a little nonsensical. They don't really mean anything, right? So just something good to keep in mind. So taking a look at the unauthorized population in the United States. And again, right, unauthorized, lacking authorization to be present and living in the US. So this is a pretty broad overview. We've got some, right, quick statistics here. So this is, right, taking a look at just kind of how this population has changed over right around the past decade. So in, right, this data pulled from 2011, there's estimated that it was around 11.3 million total unauthorized people in the United States. And this is always, right, difficult to, it's hard to get a good grasp on the number. So for 2011, around the same time, you'll see, right, people saying as low as 8 million, as high as 15 million. But this estimate was 11.3 million. And you'll see that that has, right, only increased. So this is really the latest data we have from the DHS. And their estimate was 12 million total. And the way that they, right, kind of like broke down where folks were originally from is a little bit different, but it does reflect some of the changes that we've seen. And that's better illustrated in this table to the right. So you'll see folks from Mexico still make up the biggest portion of our unauthorized population. But you'll see that in recent years, that's really dropped, right? So from 2007 to 2017, there's been, right, a pretty significant drop in folks from Mexico, but we've seen a real increase in people coming from Central America. So we've also seen a drop in people from South America, and a bit of a drop from folks from Europe and Canada, but another pretty significant increase in people coming from Asia, right, which is interesting, and it's been a little bit different. I think we've had, I think from probably around the year 2000, if I remember right, immigration from Mexico had only been growing. So this is, right, a pretty definite shift in terms of patterns. So now I mentioned earlier we'd go over what DACA is. So we just talked about unauthorized folks. Now we're talking about DACA specifically. So DACA stands for Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. So it's a form of protection from deportation that lasts for 2 years, and the application and renewal fees are right around $500. So folks with DACA can obtain a work permit, a social security number, a driver's license. In some states, in some other states, right, that's still not possible. So DACA actually is not a pathway to citizenship or even to permanent residency. It's just protection from deportation for 2 years. For a pretty big part of the last administration, new applications weren't being taken and renewals weren't being taken, right? So it was very, very limited in nature. It also doesn't offer students the ability to receive federal or state financial aid, which we'll talk about a little bit more, but it's a pretty huge barrier if you're trying to get your education. And then this is kind of a recent update. So last year, right, Congress passed the CARES Act funds, and that was funding for students for, right, the COVID-19 crisis. So DACA non-documented students were excluded from receiving any of those funds, right? which is not great. So taking a look, who is eligible for DACA, or who was eligible for DACA? Oops. Again, it's very, very limited. People talk about DACAmented folks as being, something big and scary and something we should be terrified of. But when we really look at it, it's a very small population in the U.S. So you have to have arrived in the U.S. before you were 16. You have to be older than 15. You had to have been under 31 in 2012. You had to have continuously resided here since 2007. You had to have been present in the US in 2012. And you had to have have been in school or received a high school diploma and GED. And you have to have a clear, criminal record. Including misdemeanors. So this is a very, very narrow set of eligibility requirements, that, I mean,
Yeah.
the misdemeanors, most US citizens wouldn't end up, meeting this. Yeah, so always good to point out, it's extremely limiting. So taking a look at, the actual DACA population. So in 2018, the estimate was anywhere from 1.3 to 1.9 million DACA eligible folks in the United States. So in 2020, we got a much more accurate number. So there's around 1,326,000 DACA eligible people in the US. And then there's only 643,000 people that actually have active DACA status. And the average age of DACA recipients as of 2020 was around 26.2 years old. And their average age of entry to the US was around 6.5 years old. And then here we just have another breakdown. So we saw earlier the breakdown of our unauthorized population in the US. Here we're just taking a look specifically at DACA. So as you can see, majority is once again from Mexico, lots of folks from Central and South America. And then, as you can see, a pretty significant amount from Asia. And then this table here to the right just shows us a little bit about what states have the greatest number of DACA residents. And you can see it's pretty spread out, They're kind of all across the US. Moving on, so what's DACA look like right now? I know I alluded to some of the changes, that had happened during the tenure of the past administration. But now that we just had the election and that we have Joe Biden in office, there's been a couple of really good updates to the DACA policies. So this is the latest change. So as of December 7th, 2020, first time DACA requests are being accepted again. So those were not being accepted for the better part of, I think, 2 years, might have even been 3. So you saw only, actually probably less than half of the people that were actually eligible for DACA, had DACA status. So that's great. First time applicants can request it again. So renewal requests are being accepted again. That was something else that the previous administration had repeatedly attempted to block. So people can renew their DACA now. 1-year grants of deferred action under DACA are now extended to 2 years. So that means that folks can now again apply to travel outside of the US to go see their family members. For a long time, folks at DACA were stuck here. They could not leave, otherwise they would not be allowed to re-enter the country. And then 1-year employment authorization documents, were automatically extended to 2 years, which is great. So that actually didn't require any extra action. People had employment authorization, they could, it just got automatically extended and they can continue working. So one thing to note is that applications and renewals still cost $495. So that is still a really, really significant expense that people expect, right? You have to expect every 2 years, and that's not in addition to all the other costs of immigration. It's definitely not an easy thing to apply for to keep your DACA status. So let's take a look at DACA and undocumented students in higher education specifically. So we looked at the unauthorized population, we narrowed it down to people with DACA in the US, and now we're looking at students in higher education, right, with DACA. Although we'll actually be talking about undocumented students as well. And here's just so a few facts and figures. So up here you see this little, I don't actually know what this is called. It's not a pie chart, but you see this little circular chart looking at undocumented and DACA eligible students in post-secondary education in the US. So of the 454,000 undocumented students in post-secondary education, right about half are DACA eligible students. And again, that's eligible, right? So not students that actually have DACA. And then, right, taking a look at the bottom, we can just see a few more specifics of the figures above. And this is from 2018, so I think this is the most up-to-date data that's available on students so far. So from that 454,000 undocumented students, right about 2% are in post-secondary education, and of the around 200,000 DACA eligible students in post-secondary education, right, that's 1% of the total of DACA eligible students who are in post-secondary education. Okay, so moving on. And then this is just kind of a breakdown of where these students are going to school. So for undocumented students, about 90% are undergrads and just 10% are in graduate school. And for DACA eligible students, right, 87% are undergrads with right around 13% in graduate school. So the majority of them that are able to get into higher education are mostly in right, undergraduate programs. So they're trying to get their bachelor's, and then, as we'll see in a second, because of a lot of barriers, there are far fewer who are currently, right, able to work on any sort of graduate degree or get into a graduate program. And then another breakdown, so just looking at public and private institutions. So for both undocumented and documented students, most of them are going to public schools. So very small share, less than 20%, are going to be in private institutions, which is, right, interesting to think about and good to keep in mind considering we are a private institution. So just, right, taking those numbers into account, what are some barriers that undocumented students end up facing when they're trying to get their education? Probably, right, the first one that we can think of is just financial aid. We mentioned earlier that they're not eligible for any federal or state financial aid, which I would say probably most students in higher education rely on to be able to pay for their schooling. And this table just kind of shows us, right, US citizens, you can get federal aid, you can get state aid, right? If your schools have discounted in-state tuition, you can do that. You can get government loans, private loans, you can get government grants, you can get institutional aid, you can get work study, private scholarships, right? If you're a citizen, everything is available to you, right? You have a lot of different options to finance your schooling. If you're documented or you're undocumented, essentially none of that is available to you, right? No federal or state aid. Maybe you get in-state tuition, but you can't get government loans. You could get private loans, but we all generally want to avoid private loans. No government grants, if your school is nice, you could receive institutional aid, maybe, no work study, and then you might be able to receive private scholarships if you find a program that, right, accepts students of any immigration status, and then, right, if you end up, right, if it's merit-based, if you end up winning it. So very, very limited options for paying for school. And then here's another look. This is from the Immigration Law Center. And this is just a map of tuition equity laws. So that's just saying, right, are folks able to, right, what does everyone's tuition look like? Are they able to access, right, different forms of aid so that people can actually pay for school? So I don't want to take up too much of everyone's time, but you can take a quick glance at this, and I'd be happy to provide links with some more explanations for anybody that wants to take a deeper dive. So now we'll just talk really quickly about K-16 opportunities. So we just talked about higher education. What does, right, education before that look like? So undocumented students do have a right to a K-12 education, but that doesn't extend to any sort of post-secondary education, right? So we have a right to going to elementary school, middle school, high school, but not to anything else. So there's no federal law that specifically prohibits undocumented students from attending a public college or a university, but plenty of institutions will go ahead and deny admissions anyway. And, great if you get accepted, but how are you going to pay for it, as we just saw? So private colleges actually have a lot of leeway. So they have the right to admit or deny, right, students based on their own criteria. So, right, Tulane as a private institution is able to say, yes, we will accept, right, undocumented or DACAmented students. And then this was just a survey done in 2009. I don't know that they've come out with a more updated survey since, but of the colleges who responded, right about 50% indicated that they knowingly admit undocumented students. So despite all of the legal and financial barriers, there are plenty of institutions out there that are trying to do the right thing. So taking a look, so what do, right, if colleges and universities can, right, work things out on their own, what do they actually need to do? So for one, they should be providing support through campus offices, right? They should be making sure that, right, departments are trained on how to work with undocumented and documented students. What does it mean to work with these students, right? How can they best support them? Universities should be aware of how travel restrictions may impact people's academic lives. And I do want to shout out Tulane's Center for Global Education. They did an awesome job this past year. They worked tirelessly, right, to make sure that, right, all of our students were able to continue their education. They've been really great partners, so super grateful to them. And then they should also develop application materials and, right, other requirements that don't ask about citizenship status or social security number. Private colleges can do whatever they want, so there's no real reason to be asking anybody about their status or, right, about their socials. We can always find workarounds, and that includes things like not using FAFSA, right? So if you're documented or undocumented, you can't fill out a FAFSA form because it's federal aid, you're not eligible for it. And a lot of universities require that. So what can private universities do? Again, so there's very little like set guidance for private colleges. There's a lot more leeway for institutions like Tulane. And I can tell you just through my own research, taking a look at some of our other peer and aspirational institutions, some institutions make no mention at all of undocumented students or documented students, just kind of pretend they don't exist, nothing on the website, nothing available, publicly available anywhere. Some institutions do admit students, but offer minimal funding, right? Maybe institutional aid is available, maybe nothing is available. They'll admit you, but right, who knows how you'll pay for it. Most of them, right, generally don't have an especially clear policy. Why might that be? Stakeholder influence is pretty significant, right? As that's the reality. Yeah, what does the leadership think? Who is like funding the institution, right? All of these have a bearing on how institutions, right, treat their documented or undocumented applicants. So what is Tulane doing specifically? So we talked about some of the committee goals that had already been met. So campus-wide training, the creation of the webpage. Oh, I was right. It was tulane.edu/undocumented. I can never remember whether it's backslash. The employment of a contracted immigration attorney. So Marco Balducci through TULAP. They do some great work over there. And again, they're open to Tulane faculty, staff, or students, and their families. So super helpful. So additional efforts and successes. So President Fitz on 2017 went ahead and wrote a statement of support for DACA students, right, include just urging the federal government to restore DACA. Thankfully, 3 years later, that is finally a reality. He clarified a lot of Tulane's policies, so that's actually available on the webpage. You can read the whole thing. And then, right, this is, I think, the first one actually. So the Office of International Students and Scholars held a Wave Starter where they raised over $15,000 for the International and Undocumented Student Emergency Fund. So that was a huge win. That fund still exists. It's still available. It's open to any international, undocumented, documented student who runs into, right, some sort of financial emergency. So I think the application is, right, for typically up to $500, but you know, you can submit multiple ones if you're in a real bind. So that's a really incredible resource that's still running today. So $15,000 was a lot, but obviously it won't last forever. So in 2020, right, OISS and CAE partnered again for another Wave Starter to go ahead and refill those funds, and we raised right about $5,000. So I think, if I remember right, I think we're back up to right around 12,000 in the fund, something like that. So you know, there's plenty of money for the next few years for any students that need it. I know that we have, I don't want to take up right up to the very last minute. So these are some of the training portions that we'd be doing, right? If we got a chance to do the whole thing, talk through, breakout groups, right? Brainstorm. So we'll just go ahead and work past these. So talking to students, ask what they need, ask how you can help, keep up to date on US immigration policy. As we've seen, things are complex and constantly changing. So, right, just try and know what is actually happening out there. Right, keep up to date on your terminology. So again, what we talked about before, try and remember, what does unauthorized mean? What does undocumented mean, right? What's DACA specifically? A really important one is to just openly acknowledge that you are an ally, right? That you care. So this is, for a lot of people, very, very, for good reason, right, private information. So if you, right, just are open about the fact that you support undocumented and documented students, You know, even if someone decides not to disclose to you, it's still good to know that there are folks that support them, right? And then, right, thank folks for speaking out. If they do decide to disclose their immigration status, that is a really brave thing. And it also means that they probably placed a lot of trust in you. So make sure to say thank you. And in case someone does decide to disclose to you, and that can be, right, for a ton of different reasons. Maybe you're a member of the same ethnic or racial group, you're their mentor, maybe they're forced to tell you, right? They've been put into an unfortunate position. Maybe they feel like you can help somehow. They've been referred to you by another student who knows that you're trustworthy. In general, students have no way of knowing whether you're going to be supportive or not, okay? Whether it's going to be a really great conversation or a really awful one. Right, so just try and be respectful, try and stay educated, and, you know, don't press anybody for details. Folks will tell you if they decide they're comfortable with you and that they can trust you. So when someone does disclose to you, and again, this is a little bit of the same what we've seen before, right? Ask what they need, keep up to date, make sure you know your terms, be mindful of intersectionality. And this is something we talk about more in the extended training, but I think when we mention DACA or undocumented students or people, our mind immediately tends to jump to Latinos, folks from Mexico, Central, South America. But, right, we have undocumented folks from all across the world. And, you know, that might not even be their most salient identity. So try and keep yourself educated. Try not to come in with too many preconceived notions about, right, who this person is or, right, what they're talking to you for or what they might need help with. Definitely don't blame anybody. I know folks try to be helpful, like, oh, it's, you know, terrible that your family, right, it wasn't your choice or something. That's not helpful. That doesn't make anybody feel good. Don't say that. Right, affirm that you're an ally. Right, perhaps most importantly, never out someone without their consent, not even to other folks that you trust, right? If they decide to tell you, they're telling you. Don't tell anyone else. Again, unless they explicitly say, I am very open about this and, you know, I want other people to know. But otherwise, keep it to yourself. And then finally, make sure to keep in mind that your social media, your phone, your email, right, anything written could be compromised. It could get out there, right? It could be, right? Who knows what could be suddenly become public knowledge at this point. So be careful about your record keeping. Yeah. So that pretty much wraps it up. So again, kind of our central research page is tulane.edu/undocumented. I'm actually really excited because we're finally going to be doing an overhaul of that page. So there's a lot of information there, but we're going to be trying to clean it up and make it a little bit more accessible. So that'll be happening in the coming months. And the Center for Academic Equity is always here. Undocumented and documented students are one of the populations that we are explicitly here to serve. So keep us in mind. If that's you, right, send them our way. That's about all I've got.
Awesome, Gabe.
Thank you.
Thank you. There's so much to sum up in such a short period of time. And I know I've been through your UnDocuAlly training myself, and it is really interactive. There's a lot of really great conversations you get to have with your friends and colleagues around this issue. So if anyone listening hasn't had a chance to participate, I can really highly recommend it. Go ahead.
Oh no, just, well, yeah, thank you for this time. Folks can reach out to me. We need to update our website with the link, but there's a link to a form where you can request this training. So I'll be getting that up on our website as soon as I can. Again, you can also just shoot me an email and I would be happy to work at a time to present. And that's to student orgs too. So for any students that are watching, right, I am always available, always happy to help.
Wonderful. I want to share my screen really quickly to let people know about the resources at the Counseling Center. And to remind everyone that, we are a confidential support resource, strictly confidential. So, students can come in to discuss whatever might be happening. And if part of their documentation status is what they need to talk about, that can be confidential in our offices. So, little reminder that the new location for the Counseling Center on the Uptown campus is in the Diebold complex, and the entrance is on the first floor right across from the Riley Center. Clinic hours are Monday through Thursday until 9 p.m. and Fridays until 5. I said 9 p.m., 7 p.m. I'm just gonna have everybody work extra long. 7 p.m. Monday through Thursday till 5 on Fridays. To connect with the Counseling Center, it's one phone call, and you get to speak to one of these lovely ladies, Ms. Charlesette or Ms. Belinda. The phone number is 504-314-2277. And when you make that call, the folks that answer the phone will schedule you to meet with one of our clinicians that same day. So we really strive to provide these same-day consultation appointments. We do most of them via Zoom, so that we can stay safe and unmasked. And in that consultation appointment, you can talk about what's going on. You can share as much or as little as you feel comfortable. And then that clinician will make some recommendations and do some things to come up with a plan to help provide support for whatever may be happening. Reminder that we do have a lot of groups that also provide support. And we have specific groups around all sorts of areas. We do have an international student support group and several others that are skills-based. I think there's a mindfulness group that is, there's one more session gonna begin in April for the Mindfulness for Wellness group. So there's still opportunities to get connected with groups through the Counseling Center.
With full understanding that groups might not be your thing, given, your concerns about your status.
Yeah, absolutely. The clinician may make a recommendation for a group and you have full permission to say no thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, Gabe, Jeanette, it's always wonderful to have you all with us. This is such an important topic, and I'm so glad that we're able to remind our community about the ways that we can all be allies to everyone in our community. So I think this is such an important.
And active allies, supporting and moving all the way up the socio-ecological chain, working to take action, not just on campus, but also working with lawmakers as well to reverse some of the restrictions and laws for undocumented and documented students. So yeah. So, but we could talk about this. I feel like you need to come like twice a year. Just talk about this so we can just flush it out more. But thank you so much, Gabe. We really appreciate you and Ginette coming on and sharing this information with us. And look forward to bringing back a training to our new space with our new director. So Dr. Odera, yeah. So let's plan it.
I'd like to remind everyone that we have therapists that speak Spanish, Mandarin, and Arabic. So that's another one of our services here at the Counseling Center. So culturally relevant and in their language. So please.
That's right. Thanks for that reminder, Jeanette.
Thank you, Jeanette. That's an important insert. It's important.
Well, I want to thank you all again. It's always such a pleasure to see your faces, and reminding all of our listeners to follow TU Campus Health on YouTube channel, Instagram, Twitter to see these episodes every Wednesday. We'll be back next week with another episode and a special guest, and we'll look forward to seeing everybody then. So until then, be well.